and imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting, the Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee, will be conducted both in person and virtual. In-person attendance will be limited to Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee members, superintendent, and business administrator. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted at this time. However, the meeting may be accessed remotely through Zoom and or Facebook. Agenda items listed are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed. Those items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. This meeting is being recorded by CTSB, by our secretary, by members of the public, and will be broadcast. Meeting is also being recorded by other members of the committee. Minutes will be transcribed and made public and posted on our website once approved. So I will start the meeting with a roll call. Ann Hutchinson. Aye. Jason St. Peter. Aye. Sean Stephen. I think he said he was not going to make it tonight. Bonnie Buffoni. I do not see her. Molly Thomas.
Here.
Bill Fields. Here. Thank you. Diane Singer. I don't see her. Corey Sprague.
Here.
Richard Tahoney.
Here.
And I am present. We'll go right into the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. I have a few things that I'd like to share. We continue to chug along with school, and that's going great. Really nice weather outside. I'd like to thank Steve and his crew for assembling maybe all told 20 picnic tables that are out at the elementary, middle, and high school. It's great to see young people outside having lunch and enjoying that. So that's a really good thing. The COVID numbers continue to trend down. Occasionally we have a case, but countywide the numbers are way down, and in the schools the numbers are down. We continue the pool testing. I think now we've had 2 positives in the pools, and then people have gone and had follow-up testing, and that's been fine. The other big shift, and I'll send this out in our weekly newsletter, is I strongly encourage 12 to 15-year-olds or anybody 12 and up to go ahead and get vaccinated. I know a number of people have taken advantage of that at our own clinic at Du Bois, and that's great. But 12 and up should get vaccinated. I took my 13-year-old the other day to get it, and not a big deal, and we went to a 2-hour swim practice afterwards, and said his arm only hurt a little. So
Free lollipops.
Yeah, free lollipops. If you can find a Krispy Kreme, free donuts, and apparently in New York State, lottery tickets, right? Scratchers. So all sorts of possibilities. But that's some of the good news. Really good work in the schools, teachers and paras and secretaries and maintenance and food service and anybody I'm missing are all doing really exceptional work. We also did a neat analysis of where kids are going to college or doing post-secondary work for this year and for the past 5 years, and I'll be sharing that sometime next week with everybody. Really exciting, wide range of colleges, community colleges, and opportunities in the military. So that's great. I've got 2 people that I'd like to introduce. We have a new position, the District Wellness Coordinator, and that's funded by the town of Great Barrington through their marijuana revenue, right, from that tax base. So we're really excited, and she's on the screen. Oh, and in the bottom, have Iona Smith join us. Iona's known to many of you in the community for years. She's worked at Railroad Street and Cropalo. She's done a lot of work with the schools. She was on the Health and Wellness Committee, and it's great to have her. She's based out of Stockbridge, but is in the buildings constantly, and she's taken the next 3 weeks to run around and interview everybody she can think of to get a sense of what's going on in health and wellness, and do that before the school year comes to a close. And then she'll spend some of the summer taking those gleanings and try to start to stitch together wonderful but sometimes disparate efforts. So welcome, Iona, and feel free to say hi.
Hi there. And yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. This was my first week and it has been really nice. I'm calling it my listening tour. I have a couple of guiding questions just to see what is happening. So looking for all the great things that are taking place, places that we're struggling, and then getting people's ideas about what they would like to see in a strategic plan moving forward for wellness K-12 with a really sort of thoughtful, cohesive way of building that strategic plan out. So it's very important and very exciting work. And it's been a great first week. I'm very excited about it. And also, if anyone else would like to contribute to that, the way to get a hold of me is through my email. So it's iona.smith@bhrsd.org.
Great. Thank you, Iona. Welcome aboard. We're super excited to be working with you.
Thank you.
The next person I'd like to introduce is our incoming assistant principal at the elementary school. And that person is Cynthia Schwartz. Cynthia comes to us and she's with the yellow background and the red top. So she really stands out. She comes to us from the Pittsfield schools, did her undergraduate work at Rollins and her graduate work at MCLA. She's worked as a teacher and an assessment coordinator, and she really impressed me and the search committee in a number of different ways. And then we did the reference checks, and we're even more impressed. So we welcome Cynthia. And Cynthia, just say a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Schwartz. I live in Lenox. Hi, Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee was my kid's principal for a little bit. I am absolutely thrilled to be having the opportunity to work at Muddy Brook Elementary. I am the assessment coordinator for the district at Pittsfield Public Schools currently. I was a 6th grade math teacher at Reed Middle School, and I also was a math coach at Egremont Elementary School. I raised 3 children here in the Berkshires. I absolutely love being here. I love to do stuff outdoors. And I'm really looking forward to being a part of the Muddy Brook community. I'm looking forward to listening to everything they have to say about ways we can improve the community. And I can't wait. I'm so grateful for the opportunity.
Great. Welcome, Cynthia. We're excited to have you join us. Okay, so continuing on, the next thing I wanted to share, and folks who are parents have a sense of this already, is what we're doing for the summer and the fall, and those have been informed by family and staff surveys. So the last time I took a look at this, we had something like 150 responses from families. So in many cases, people have 2 or 3 school-age children in schools. So we're starting to make some real progress on this. We're looking at a range of opportunities in the elementary, middle, and high school, and then some other things that are happening district-wide. So every year we run a program for students with special needs, and we're continuing to run that. And every summer for the last several summers, we've run our Project Connection program, which has been specifically targeted to high needs students, whether it's academically high needs or economically disadvantaged. This year, with some of the support we have and some of the flexibilities we have, we're opening that up to a much wider group. We're also going to do some individual tutoring in the summer. We have an opportunity for a cohort of students to take classes at Simon's Rock at Bhrsd, so that's targeted to high school students. We have a partnership with the Khan Academy that's going to be district-wide, and not just for this summer, but for the next several years, so people can do self-directed or supported work. Some of that can be, and they have an offering of like 30 to 40 classes with a emphasis on middle and high school secondary level opportunities, but there also are some elementary school math and writing things. So students could use that to support around credit recovery or catching up. They could do stuff around accelerating their learning. There are a series of classes that are like boot camp for AP classes. So 10th graders or students who are finishing 10th grade now who are planning to take AP classes as 11th or 12th graders can sign on and do some like the equivalent of a 2-week class to go into AP chemistry ready to hit it out of the park, to go into AP biology ready to hit it out of the park. We're continuing our options with virtual high school with Brigham Young University. I'm going to invite the principals to chime in case I missed anything, or John Bruno. Does anybody want to add anything to that list?
I'll say that, thank you, Peter. I'll just say the list that you just rattled off was very comprehensive. The one thing that I would highlight in connection to both the tutoring and the BYU program is we are specifically trying to support students in the high school who are not earning credit. So we're tracking all of that data, and that will be an opportunity for students to do some recovery over the summer, because we'd like to keep our students on track so that when they return to us next fall, they're not in a place where they're substantially credit deficient that would set them back and set them off course for their achievement of a high school diploma. So we're trying to work really hard to support that crew.
Okay. And Tim or Ben, I likely covered everything, but did I miss anything? Or John, did I miss anything? Okay, we're good.
Covered it.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. So that's exciting. We're waiting to hear back from parents. We'll then sort of work towards scheduling classes. As often is the case with surveys, we tested the survey before we sent it out, and we realized initially that you had to click yes to see the description. So within minutes, we corrected that, and then you could say, I don't know, and then you could see the descriptions. If you have follow-up questions, it's really easy to get to me. The other person who's really involved in this is obviously Tom Kelly and John Bruno. So you can follow up there. I think we're going to be able to offer a really robust range of options, and we're still talking with community partners about bringing them in to provide some other things. Oh, a couple ones, Christy. Now I'm remembering that I forgot. In addition to the Simon's Rock opportunity, there's a new group called GB Labs, which is headed up by Joe Grockmall Jr., and he's planning a couple really neat opportunities for students. So that's exciting. There's a former graduate who's doing some work at the middle school, specifically targeted to students of color, to give them opportunities to expand their leadership and voice. And it's bigger than that, but that's where it's starting. So lots of good stuff. Any questions about that?
Anyone have any questions or comments?
I had a couple questions.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Peter, you said that the Project Connection for the summer, there's going to be significant openings of people who are eligible. Is there anybody who wants to do it that would not be able to at this point, or how would parents find out?
What we're hoping is that parents participate in the survey, and we'll send a reminder out because people may not get that. We have a branding issue, and we always have, and I don't remember if we were talking about in this group or I was talking about another group, but Project Connection is sort of like our Band-Aid, right? In many ways. And some people would prefer we called it an adhesive bandage. So we are running summer after school and extended day programs, and lots of people see that under the Project Connection umbrella, but the umbrella is actually bigger than Project Connection. It's just the district's extended day and out of school time programs. But we think we have the capacity to meet all express needs. But we're not going to know what the express needs are unless people tell us what they want to do, right? So I'll send out the survey again and say, you got this before, you may have responded. If you have, that's great. If you haven't responded, for the moment, the sky's the limit. Let us know what you're interested in doing, and we'll see if we can make a match.
Okay, because when you described it, you specifically just now said Project Connection. And in the survey, if I remember, it was all Project Connection. I think that was the language used. So so you're saying it's not going to be just, there's a potential, depending on how much interest there is, of not just Project Connection, but also other, well, obviously sometimes not extended day, but summer programs that are not under that Project Connection,
Right.
But separate,
Right.
as well. And that's where that's what may be open to anyone who wants to.
Right. I mean, probably from a student or family perspective, they're just neat programs during the summer that people from Berkshire Hills schools can participate in. From a funding perspective, there are different buckets of money that support different things, and there's some constraints tied to some of the grants, but we're going to do our best to make that be seamless for the participants.
Okay, sounds good. The other question I had was, and I think it was, we were talking about the Khan Academy with the plethora of courses that people could take. Just, off the top of my head, I can see a lot of parents being kind of overwhelmed by the process and trying to find out what exactly their kids might need. So I was just wondering if either their teachers this year or guidance counselors or someone is going to recommend age appropriate or grade appropriate. Is there going to be a list of stuff that they think would be helpful, or the teacher's going to, at their last report, could say, okay, we probably would, this would really be helpful for you? Is it going to be more detailed, or is it just going to be a big list and kind of parents are going to be choosing to add their own, or have we not gotten to that stage yet?
No, you're making a good point. Let me talk with, we have more than a big list, but let me talk with the principals around how we can do some targeted outreach. So if my son would benefit from being in a math class, it would be helpful if somebody on the faculty shared that with me, so I would consider signing him up, right? So let me, that's a good ask. The principals all heard it, and we'll talk about it in our weekly meeting on Tuesday, and we'll message that out in some way. What it might be is, and I'm thinking a little on the fly, but in the elementary school, the primary point of contact is the student's classroom teacher, right? So it'd be relatively easy for the classroom teacher to reach out to 12 families and say, don't forget to do the survey. This might be particularly relevant for your son or daughter. In the middle and the high school, the primary point of contact is the advisor or the crew leader, or that person, and they have a similar caseload, a little bigger than the elementary school, and I think they could do the same thing.
Yeah,
right?
or even if it's not, purely student specific, but at least grade oriented, whereas these are, the 10 to 12, because sometimes if you have too much information, it can overwhelm. I know it can overwhelm me as a parent, trying to figure out which of these would be best for my kids. So just, recommend these 10, pick these 10 or we feel would be good or et cetera. Might be helpful for.
And maybe we'll do it both ways. So we'll send something, these are the opportunities for elementary, middle, and high schools by grade, and then have the individual teachers connect with families, right? And the whole thing is, like this is meant to be interesting, fun, engaging, and supportive. So if you have an opportunity to send your kid to summer camp, that might be the best thing in the world after a crazy COVID year, right? So take advantage of that. If you want your kid to do some work in math or reading, that's another great thing. If you want your high school age kid to be part of Spartan fitness or some project-based science exploration, that's great too.
Yeah, I think the parents know what's best, but it's, as you said, give them the most opportunities and they decide which is best for their.
And so
I do like the targeted though. I had not thought of that before. Yeah, I mean, I thought the way they did the parent-teacher conferences at the middle school this year, where you just met with one member of the team, from my perspective, was very good and effective.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. And there's been, limited opportunities for parent-teacher engagement this year. So maybe some direction going off in the summer would be well placed. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I do too, and we will work as a team on that.
The other thing that was mentioned for the high school was greenagers and jobs at the school. So
Yeah, so they're both. So we have a long-standing relationship with greenagers, and they do work with our students. A lot of it's field work and trail work, right? And it's compensated, so that's one possibility. There are a small number of jobs at the school, some connected to grounds maintenance, planting trees, other things. And this summer, in the context of the outdoor dining in Great Barrington, our greenhouse group or horticulture group is gonna do a lot of work to support flower boxes or planted gardens that are also barriers around where people are eating. And it's a neat thing because it's a need for the town. It addresses a safety issue, and it also gives our students an opportunity to put their experiences into a real life context. So that's another one. There may be some other ones. The other one, and this is not a school-based thing, but it's just an important thing. All the swimming establishments need lifeguards, and there's always summer lifeguard training, and the pay's great, and you get to sit outside often, right? I mean, you gotta watch your sunscreen, but a great summer job, particularly if you wear a hat. So all sorts of things like that.
Peter, I just want to add to that because this is the first year we're going to do it connected to the summer project connection at the high school program. We are going to have a member of our staff who is going to be coordinating with community organizations that are looking for young people for that they need for employment. And that person will be helping to find high school students who are looking for jobs. So hopefully that will help on that front end.
Great, thanks, Christy.
That's awesome.
Can I ask a question about the AP classes? Are these online, or are they going to be taught by somebody in the district, or are we bringing somebody in to teach them? Do you know, or am I being too far ahead here?
No, I know. So they're not it's not taking a whole 40 weeks of an AP class
It's like a prep.
and squeezing it into a summer.
Yeah.
They're online through Khan Academy, super high quality. We had a nice chat with them. And I think, Christy, do you remember, are they all about 2 weeks in duration?
Yes, and it's kind of like a review and prep for students to do if they're going into an AP course, Bill.
Yeah, so I think that's great, and it makes the most sense for rising 11th and 12th graders to do, but there could be some instances where it might be interesting for slightly younger students to do. The neat thing about this is Salcon invested, and his team invested so much time in it. It's super highly individualized and differentiated, so this is all about like computer logic, and you start working on it, and as you demonstrate some level of understanding, it points you in the right direction. So if you keep answering right and it's relatively easy, it ratchets up the complexity very quickly. And if you keep answering sort of something less than right, like wrong or confused, then it points you in another direction. So I think that'll be fun. Lots of sort of embedded video clips, images, high level of engagement.
Other questions, comments? Peter, I will assume that at our next meeting or the one after that, you'll give us an update on this, including, who signed up, not who, but how many people and how successful this has been.
Yeah, no, we will, and we expect that more people will sign up than will actually do it, right? So the will is strong, but the body's occasionally weak. So we say we sign up 400 people, that might yield 350 people, but creating the opportunities we think will be really exciting, and particularly like for high school students. I think we've got 10 slots at Simon's Rock. Like that's a full college level class. That's huge, right? And could be really interesting. And then the 2-week thing with Khan Academy is a nice way to dip your toe, but not give up your whole summer. Right? And even the Bhrsd thing's not giving up, the Simon's Rock thing's not giving up your whole summer, but you get what I'm saying. So again, we'll put an update in the newsletter. We'll remind people to do the survey one more time. Everybody's done a lot of work on this, but particularly John Bruno, our Director of Learning and Teaching, has done a lot, along with Tom Kelly and Ryan at the high school to pull this together. Okay, Steve, are you okay if I move to the next topic?
Yeah, I don't see any other questions in the audience, and I think we've covered this one well.
Okay, and just if the CTSB person's on the host on one system, but it'd be great if my laptop could also be the host, because I may present a couple things in a few minutes. So the next thing on the agenda is a revised statement of interest, or SOI, that we hope to send in the next maybe week or so to the MSBA. And ideally at the end of this conversation, if the school committee is so moved, I'd like to have a vote to authorize us to perhaps make some changes and send it in. The school committee and the public saw or could have seen the statement of interest. It's roughly a 21-page document. I mean, there are a couple attachments, an 18-page document that articulates some of what's going on in the district, some of the deficiencies in the high school, some of the things we've done to correct or mitigate the deficiencies, and tries to make a case for why we need the MSBA's help in being accepted into their program and moving forward. With this submission, I'll then send a 2 or 3 page letter detailing all the things we've done as a district and a community to set this up. I'll reference the strong bond ratings of the three towns, the revised regional agreement, the shift in that agreement around the assessment for capital projects. I'll reference that, and I knock on wood as I say this, but the long string of successful budget votes in all our towns. West Stockbridge approved our budget, Great Barrington and Stockbridge are coming up. I'll mention the several federally funded and private grants we've received over the years, which are another indication of our perceived success from outside objective parties. I'll mention our work around equity and access. I'll mention our work around college and post-secondary admissions and those pathways. I'll mention our vocational work, on and on and on. And I think at a previous meeting I mentioned, normally they turn around a response around the SOIs in a year, or sometimes a little more than a year. And this year, because of the timing, we'll submit it in June, and we hope to hear by November or December if we move forward. And then after sort of this part, we could talk about the two-track path and the neat meeting that the Finance Committee and Buildings and Grounds jointly had.
Yeah, Peter, I was going to say, just to be clear, there's two issues tabled, not necessarily tonight, but one is the SOI and approval of it, which hopefully we'll do tonight. The other is the really good meeting the Buildings and Grounds and Finance Subcommittee had, and before that, our last school committee meeting, where it's very clear that the school committee is planning to move ahead with or without the state's help, and hopefully with, but that's separate from the SOI in the sense that we want to submit this, I think that was the consensus, but it's not going to be we're not putting our eggs all in one basket. We're going to keep moving on this immediately so that if we're turned down or if we're accepted, we're still made a lot of progress before then.
Yeah, correct. And maybe, and I defer, Steve, to you and Rich, maybe we handle the SOI part first, and then I have another document connected to the two-track approach that I can present and talk through that.
I think that makes sense because it's the two-track approach is separate from the SOI. If anything, the two-track approach minimizes the SOI in some extent that it's important, but it's not, doesn't mean the end of, for another year, the building project if we're turned down. So I think I would like to hear from people about the SOI and a vote on that, and then we'll talk about the two-track approach if no one objects.
That's great. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up with the SOI, so Steve Sill and I rewrote this and this is similar or based on previous versions of it. And a lot of the language in it is in response to specific technical questions. Steve Sill and I are both a little too close to this, and having edited it for years, we're not seeing it with the freshest eyes, right? So if somebody just opened and read the 18 pages, you're going to see things that we're not seeing anymore in it. And if folks have either general concerns or specific things that you'd like us to revise in advance of submission, I'd love to hear those. And I'll take careful notes and make suggestions. And it could be something as big as, like, some of this is written in the passive voice. If you rewrite it in the active voice, it'll be more compelling. And then we'll incorporate that. That's an easy one, right? Or it could be, there's a box we could check where the building's unsafe. Fundamentally, we think the building is safe, but there's single pane glass in the windows that's not safety glass, and if somebody bumped into those, it would be really bad. Is that unsafe enough, or does unsafe refer to and this is not the case at Monument, right? But in some other school, does it refer to asbestos falling from the roof or something? So have a way, and I'm happy to write down general comments or specific comments.
So comments, yes, go ahead.
Okay, on page 10,
Mm-hmm.
okay, program and operations. I think we need to put the CVTE program into a more dire strait than what is stated there. We say various science, physical education, horticulture, automotive programs cannot be offered due to existing facility constraints. I think we need to say that these programs, we've made an investment in CVTE. We've talked about that for 2 years, and it's alarming, at least in my view, that the facilities do not match what we have wanted to do. And I don't think it's stated that strongly. We just don't have existing facility constraints. We have terrible facilities. The greenhouse is a walking time bomb. It is unbelievably obsolete. And it hurts our Chapter 74 horticulture program. I understand maybe the form that's being used here, but I think we need more active language that says, and I would like to see this in, that the CVTE program, as now stands, is in dire jeopardy of no viability, because we cannot do what we say we want to do. The auto facility, you can't put a truck in with a lift because of the roof. Is there some way that you can be much more active, and also on page 14, incorporating some dire, because my feeling on this is, they'll read this and say, oh, we've read these how many years?
Right.
Maybe we can, I guess, catch them and say, well, we've added some new things. And if they don't catch them, then the last paragraph on page 14, as detailed previously, our existing CTE spaces are inadequate. No, they're not inadequate. They're abysmal. We can't do child, we've got certified programs, which you say here. I think can you take that those certified programs are in danger of losing certification. We can't do a nursery school program because we don't have the square footage, because it's operating out of a former home ec area. The playground is inadequate space. So what I'd like to see is much more dire, that the CVTE program, which you have said we are really gung-ho on, has to be shown to be in danger of maybe being curtailed by the district.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's super helpful and crystal clear, and I am one for strong language, so I hear you. I can do that quite easily.
I think you can take it a step further too with that, and just tying into some of the grants that we've received and some of the work that we want to carry out from the grants, kind of saying the state has already, given us the money and funded us, but they're basically, it's a baseless offer if we don't have the structures in place and if we don't have the building in place to actually support these efforts.
Okay, no, that's good.
But I agree with it, with the exact same thing that I pulled out. The other thing, just a bigger.
Before, Corey,
yeah,
just a point of order, I guess, for Steve. On these amendments, do we want to vote on them individually, Steve, or, I know everyone's in agreement with what he just said.
Well, there's two ways of doing this. One is we can vote on it individually, or what's the deadline for this, Peter? Excuse my forgetting that.
It's in June. I could look it up. I'm sorry. I have a few too many things on my head, and I was at a meeting till almost 10 o'clock last night, so it's out of my head. Steve Soul might remember, and while you're talking, I'll look it up. But I think
only because the cleanest thing to do, Rich, would be for us to get another copy of this at our next meeting and vote on it then. But if we're getting close to the deadline, then I think we should do each one individually, each change individually, instead of trying to meld it all together into one huge amendment.
So it's Friday, June 25th. So this is one of those great instances where we're way ahead of ourselves. So you can keep giving me comments. Steve, Sol, and I could revise this, bring it back to you on our next meeting's on the 3rd, and we could do our formal vote on the 3rd.
Rich, you're the one who asked the question. Are you comfortable with that?
I am totally comfortable with that, and I think if we're doing that, then we don't need to vote on, I mean, there's consensus around what Bill just said. And then we come back and on our next meeting is first agenda item, yes or no, just vote.
Yeah, exactly.
On a final total, I think that's better, I like that, but I do want to make all the sausage tonight.
Yeah, exactly. We could spend hours trying to put this together, which never works out as well as if we just come back with a clean copy.
Okay, so with that, are there other comments from the school committee or areas for growth? And I see Ann.
And
On page 14, it's sort of like you keep giving them workarounds for things like family and consumer science where they can boil and steam. You can't teach family and consumer science when you can only boil and steam.
No, that was the intention of that sentence, but I will.
You said we can't do it. You can't. Are we teaching any cooking classes whatsoever? I don't think we're doing anything.
No, it's really limited into.
Right, and the other one is the labs, which isn't laid out here. My understanding from seeing those labs a few years ago was that there's no drains for the showers. So how the heck somebody gets chemical burn, you get them in a shower, and there's no place for the water to go?
Steve, so is that correct? Or there are floor drains, they're just not regularly used?
There are no floor drains underneath the emergency showers, but when we built the middle and elementary school, we have emergency showers in the middle school, and there are no floor drains there. And when I inquired about that, that is by design and intentional, so that whatever happens to be on that child doesn't go into the wastewater treatment system. So if it's acid or whatever, some sort of corrosive substance, we don't want it going into the system. We want to clean it up from the floor.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, no.
I get it, and it's really interesting.
Steve, the other question I have while you're on the line is the hoods that we have in the science room are not functional, don't vent outside, so that limits what we're able to do. Is that correct?
No, that's also not correct. After the first go around with the MSBA, I did have the hoods inspected and tested, and we have plenty of draw, and it does go to the exterior of the building.
Excellent.
The downside on the hoods, which isn't really a downside, it's just a fact, is that the walls of the hood are constructed with transite board, which is an asbestos-containing material. However, they're all in very, very good shape. There's no nicks or cuts or anything. So when we do a project, it will have to be abated properly, but there's nothing to worry about right now with those walls.
Okay, perfect. Anyone else?
Well, I have some more points.
Sure.
We can get into individual details, but I think the lab whole component needs to be beefed up with the same type of more aggressive language that Bill brought to the CBT thing.
Yeah, that's mention the area. I'll work with Steve to frame it in a good way, and we'll keep going. But that's good.
In regards to that preference,
Well,
I can help.
oh, the whole thing about inadequate storage space for chemicals, I mean, all of it just is a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, it's already happened,
It did happen.
so we should mention it. That should be mentioned.
Yeah.
Should be mentioned.
There's no storage anymore, storage space for band instruments. If we're leaving their multi-thousand.
That's in here, I think.
Peter, there's not a limit on how much you can put in this. So I'm not sure we have to tell you what area, although we can suggest it. I think we should detail every area that's insufficient in the high school. If it gives us 50 pages, it gives us 50. We need them to see that it's not limited necessarily to this area.
As it stands right now, Peter, what are the big pieces that are different from this than what was submitted most recently?
So, and Steve and I can both talk to this. So some of it is just sort of updating dates and concerns, right? Then some of it is we included work that we've done since the last submission. We have an issue with our boilers, and we rewired that whole area entirely. It's the 53-year-old boiler system. We're now running on one boiler. They provide heat, which we don't need right now, but it's also an integrated system that provides hot water. Hot water is important from a health and safety perspective, and also from a kitchen perspective, though our appliances in the kitchen, I think most of them have the capacity to heat their own water, but they operate better if they come in with preheated water. So some language upgrades. Steve, am I missing anything else that we added? We did do a whole section with a series of bullet points and new areas. We added a new handicapped accessible bathroom. So that's a shift, I think, in a positive way. Anything else, Steve? So
Yeah, the hallway doors are now being held open by magnets tied into the fire alarm system to promote air circulation and better sight lines from a safety perspective. Most of what I changed, kind of in the areas that pertain to me, is work that we have done over the last 12 months or so. Obviously, I understand and I agree with everybody. We want to make it a little more aggressive language, but there's the other side of that coin where the MSBA also wants to know if they're going to give us $100 million for a project, they want to make sure that there's a group or organization that's going to take care of that investment. So there's a little bit of a fine line there. We do have to demonstrate that we are taking care of the asset.
I agree with what Steve said. I think one way to mitigate against his concern, particularly with CBTA, it's not even that we have maintained everything, it's just education has changed. And our building hasn't kept up with it.
Right.
So, I mean, that's, and our focus as a district has changed, and our building doesn't fit that anymore.
Right.
So,
Which is asked for in there.
And
so the other one is the beginning, the very first thing on the priority is right on page 4. Otherwise, the condition seriously jeopardizing health and safety of school children. So I don't know what kinds of, obviously it's not structurally unsound. That's not the issue. I mean, the roof's not falling in, but otherwise in the condition. Is that what the labs need? Is that what a cafeteria that's too crowded to feed kids in? Is that what having those kind of windows that could kill somebody if they broke them? Is that having all those doors that provide access, 43 doors to the building? Are those, to me, those things seriously jeopardize the safety of our students? And since I don't know the definitions that they're looking for, but,
yeah, I think in bringing this up, you're having me question it too, right? So I think what I want to do is I'll tomorrow reach out to the MSBA and ask for clarification and what the definition is. Somebody's emergency could be somebody's bump in the road, and vice versa. And we might be thinking that our emergency is a bump in the road, and some community down the pike is characterizing what we're seeing as problematic, as actually an emergency, and that's why they're getting ahead of us on the list.
I think what you said is the first step is to get some clarification from the MSBA, but I just want to make sure everybody's playing by the same set of rules. And I never focused on these boxes before, and I did this time too. I mean, I'd be interested to know if that's what DeConnick and Mount Greylock and Wacona checked. what boxes they check. So I'm very familiar with their prior high schools and now the high schools they're moving into. And if they're all checking one, we're as bad off as they were before they got approved. And is that why schools are going ahead of us? Because they're like, this is a check the box thing, which wouldn't surprise me with the MSBA. I just want to make sure we're on market with everybody else about how we're defining the condition of our school.
Yeah, that's good, and that could be the game changer, right? That if they fund 30 schools and 28 of them are priority one, that's how you move it forward. So I'll clarify that.
My concern, I'll tell you, is that, the final clause is always the killer, right? Comma, where no alternative exists. So I think I think they are talking about structural things. I mean, we're gonna go on with this, like, if your windows are dangerous, you can fix your windows. If your labs are dangerous, you cannot use them. But like, if your building's gonna fall over, there's nothing else you can do.
But you can't not use labs. You can't run a high school without labs.
Yeah.
I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, maybe that's an extreme thing, but
You can't run the CTV programs without a lift, without a building where you can put a lift. I mean, you can't provide the education that we're trying to provide without different rooms. And we can't put the lab somewhere else. We're going to put them in the library. I mean, you know what I mean?
No, I'm not. I agree with you 100%, but I'm just saying, I think that language, I think, is going to need some parsing, but I think Peter's going to figure that out.
You can't tell from that.
Yeah. No, that's good. Anything else from the committee?
This is a tiny thing. On the top of page 8, age of windows, year of glass repair replacement, type of windows is not covered. Just something missing there. The very top of page 8.
Oh, yeah, correct. So.
Because we are worried about those windows.
Single pane guillotines.
Yes.
Am I getting what you're saying?
I actually had somebody fall through my window in class. I had a kid who was leaning against the window right before the class started. And he tripped on a desk and went backwards right through the window. I told him to stay, and the big piece was hanging.
Yeah.
I got Sonny down. We told the kid to stay out.
Right.
And then as Sonny started working on it, the thing dropped right down.
Scary. So,
it was scary.
Bill, so the clarifying question is that student sitting across from you right now?
No. This was way beyond Rich's time.
Those are safety. Yes, there are huge windows that go floor to ceiling.
No, I'm
Okay. That's a good catch, and that's, I'll include that too. So, it seems like we've got a lot of good.
I have one comment.
Oh, yes, sir. Keep on.
Steve, is that all right?
Yeah, go right ahead.
I think we should add in here a full explanation of our arrangements with Richmond and with Farmington River. And I'd even like to see some kind of a little map or something to show the geographic area with which just that we serve these other towns. We serve twice as many towns for the high school as we are a district. And we serve a massive geographic area, which is important. I mean, everyone loves to target per capita with education. Everyone's entitled to having a good, decent high school within a reasonable distance from their house, regardless of how many kids are in it. And this high school is very valuable to a wider swath, a really huge geographic swath, huge. But also, I think our tuition agreements, the services we provide to the 3 other towns should be important to the state. Should be considered.
No, agreed. So I'll fold that in.
Again, I think to Rich's point, if we put too much in, they can choose not to ignore parts of it they don't think are pertinent. I don't think we should put too little in. I think we should put as much as we can in that's truthful and let them decide what they think is important.
Okay. So Steve, if it's okay with you, what I'll do is, Steve Soul and I will continue to work on this. We'll come back with a really top-notch, wonderfully compelling, factual document addressing all the things you all talked about. If between now and maybe the next week or so, either school committee members who read this or members of the public who read it want to add any other suggestions or ideas, just shoot me an email, and I'll do my best to incorporate it into the final version.
Maybe Christie should circulate it to some of the high school teachers too, or, you know, some of the team leaders there or something.
Yes.
Or however you guys want to do that, but I'd like to get someone.
Get them to come up with dangerous events.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dangerous events, but also avenues where maybe we're not reaching our academic potential because of limitations of the building.
So Christy, if you could, or I can send you an email with a link to the SOI, and if you could forward it on to your staff, particularly with the lens of how is the building limiting academic opportunities and potential, and we could get some grounded feedback from science teachers and math teachers and the CVTE folks, whoever, right? That would be great.
Did pictures go with this? Do you send them pictures?
I don't know if there's a way to include pictures. They did a site visit and took hundreds of pictures, and there's a strong possibility they'll do another one. But let me figure out if I can do that, and that would be another thing
Especially the greenhouse.
Another point, Peter, to Rich's point, let's look at some other SOIs. Other ones may have done pictures and all kinds of things that we just haven't thought of.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it may make sense to do particularly in this day and age where people have not been visiting as much, to do narrated video with Steve Soul, Christy, and I walking around the building and pointing out things.
And maybe ask some students to
Yeah.
get, because when we were on the Next Steps Committee, who was the student, Ben's daughter, talked about the year that she had no light. She had no light from the beginning of the day to the end of the day.
She was always in the internal
She was
classroom.
always inside. She said she was blessed when it was 3 o'clock and she was able to be going outside. So maybe some students.
Right, for like half an hour of sunlight in the middle of winter. No, so that's good. So Steve and I will work on this. We'll get ideally a draft back to the committee a week from tomorrow. So we'll work on it for a week more, and then you'll have time to read it again in advance of the meeting.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so can I share the next thing, Steve? Is that okay?
The early dismissal plan?
No. Do you want to wait on the?
So the early dismissal plan, that's on there, so.
Oh, no, I'm talking about something else, the 2-track thing.
I want to talk about the shootout plan
Yeah,
a
I
little
want to
bit.
talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. The 2-track thing, yes. I forgot about that. It wasn't on there. Yes, please go ahead with that.
It's sort of part of it.
Yes.
Again, I'm sorry. Could the person from CTSB give me permission on my computer so I can share a document?
Peter, you are a co-host now, so you can go ahead and share.
Okay, good.
How do I get
Thanks.
that?
It'll just come up on
Oh,
the
it'll
screen.
come up? Okay. Fasten your seatbelt.
Sorry, just hang on a sec.
No problem.
Okay, so you should be able, good. So you can see this, and let me get rid of this other piece. So here's what, so we had this great meeting with Buildings and Grounds and the Finance Subcommittee last week. And this is sort of, in simplest terms, my making sense of what we talked about. So there are two possibilities moving forward: working with the MSBA or doing a locally supported project. The MSBA project is defined clearly on their website. It's one of those like flow charts where you go from one box to the next to the other. And we did that before, and that's that. All right. We're gonna edit and submit the SOI before the June deadline. So the deadline's June 25th. We talked about that. A locally driven project, which is the other alternative, would follow the same base structure and path, including laws, codes, and regulations, but the process for funding it would be very different. In the short term, we're proposing to hire a consultant to outline the process we're going to take, including all legal and code requirements. So again, for the MSBA, it's very clearly spelled out. If we did it as a do our own thing, it'd be different. We'd like to hire a consultant who has experience both as a owner's project manager and who has experience working both within and outside the MSBA, right? So everybody's got to follow state laws, codes, and guidelines. And there are folks out there who've done MSBA projects and who've also done municipal or other projects. And ideally, we would find somebody who has experience in both areas. We need to do a little more research around the exact steps for hiring said consultant and our potential investment in that role, right? Do we want to hire a consultant and pay them $5,000, $20,000, or $40,000? And then if we go above a certain threshold, then there are different things we have to do. Another, and obviously all of this is subject to public purchasing laws, right? In a parallel way, and Sharon will work on this for our next meeting, we'll do a flow chart around paying for and financing all aspects of this work. So because the MSBA already paid for schematic design for the last project, no matter what we do, we're on the hook to pay for that, right? And I think that's in the order of $800,000 to $1 million. So that's the first thing we have to figure out how to solve for. And then after that, there are all sorts of other steps we have to address and follow. And what we'd like to do is, as we come back and share some of that information from this and our conversations and stuff from Sharon, our sort of rough timeline is in the next 6 weeks, we would propose advertising and interviewing for that consultant's role. Right now, some of you may say 6 weeks is too slow. We need to do it in the next month. And others of you might say 6 weeks is too ambitious. Let's do it in 8 to 12 weeks. I'm not wedded to those times. I just wanted to put a stake in the ground so you could all react to that. So I think that ends up being a pretty good summary of our conversation with the two groups. Rich or Steve or Bill or Jason, did I miss anything in that?
I don't think so, Tom.
So let's discuss it if you did miss it. I think it's pretty comprehensive.
I'll put it in different words. The way I view this is we are moving to a design phase at this time next year. We are, anybody listening to this who's in any of the 3 towns who's going to a town meeting next year is going to see a bond offering to design a new high school. That may be an MSBA project, but it may not. But we are starting to work towards that right now. And 2 years from now, you're gonna drive by the high school and see backhoes. That's my approach to it. And the 6 weeks, I think is fine. I think it's on the outside of what we need to do that, but I'm not gonna fight you on a couple of weeks here or there. I'd rather make sure we get it right and do it in 6 weeks than rush it and do it in a month.
Okay.
I just think as long as when we kick off next fiscal year, we're moving towards it. I think we're gonna be, yeah.
Yep, that makes perfectly good sense.
Good. So let me, yikes. I don't know how I did this.
Well, while you're trying to figure out, Peter, does anyone else have any other comments? So I think you got the flavor of our meetings, and I feel much better where we are now than where we were 2 weeks ago.
Thank you.
Good. All right. Sorry, I figured out what I did.
And I think we also should be very aware that we should be communicating with the 3 towns through their selectmen and their finance committees. So they're with us every step, and nothing can be said, oh, this came out of the blue. I think one of us or the representatives from each town can go to the selectmen and say, this is what we discussed at our meeting, and this is what our steps are, and we're just here to tell you about it, not to put anything in front of you. This is where we're headed. It's very much like what the next step's going to be.
Yeah.
2 years ago. And I think the changes in the select board have not been that dramatic, that they will probably remember those meetings that we did have with these 3 towns.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep going, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
On the agenda, but I'm not speaking to it tonight, but I want to speak to something connected to it. Originally was the overview of our early dismissal plan. We shared a document with the school committee, and it's in the folder there. Because it was tabled, we're not going to talk about it till our June 3rd meeting. But next week, I'm scheduling 2 parent forums on Wednesday and Thursday, both at 6 p.m. To share some context and respond to questions. So our parents and families are more aware. And I sent out an email earlier today to our staff about meeting also next week, where I'm gonna update the staff and ask for their feedback. The staff meeting is on Thursday, the 27th at 4 p.m. So 2 meetings next week on Wednesday and Thursday at 6 for families, and a meeting on Thursday at 4 for staff. I understand that the impact of this can be slightly different in each of the buildings, and particularly more different for the elementary school. I think since our last meeting, and I'm walking down this slope of talking about something I'm not going to talk about, but I think we solved a lot of the concerns that were addressed. So I'll share that with families and staff, and then we'll come back and talk about it, or we'll have an opportunity to talk about it with the school committee. So that should be fine. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So the next one, and I'm going to present this too, is one of the things that came up, I think, at our last meeting was this challenge that there's so much going on in the district. Occasionally, we surprise people with what's happening, and that's not our intention. So I tried to put together, and I hope it's understandable, a little chart around likely strands of work for the near future. So think of this as like the previews for the movies. And this is stuff that we may talk about in September, October, over the next couple of years. This is a very high-level snapshot of a lot of things that are incorporated in our district improvement plans. But I think sharing it would be helpful. So I'm going to present it. This right now is shorthand, and a couple of people in the community reminded me that this is jargon heavy. So the final version of this will be like the New York Post at an 8th grade reading level, and highly accessible, right? But we put our work into 4 buckets: learning and instruction and professional development, and those two really go hand in hand. There's a 3rd bucket that we're calling other, and these are things that don't fit into the first 2 buckets. And then the 4th bucket is buildings and grounds, right? And this is looking forward. So the SOI and the MSBA process isn't on this because we're in the middle of those conversations. So the first one in learning and instruction is relationship and SEL. SEL is the first jargony thing. It's just social emotional learning, right? So things around relationships and self-regulation and how we connect with each other. That's an important strand of work that's connected to advisory and happiness and optimism and all sorts of stuff. We're going to work with young people on it, and at the same time, we're going to do a lot of work with staff on it. We're super excited that we've got 25 people participating in work with the Yale Child Study Team on the Ruler Initiative. And we're going to work on that for 2 years, 10 administrators and 15 school-based staff. And then in the second year, it'll be 25 more school-based staff. And this is going to complement our existing work, right? So that's a big chunk of work that's coming. And I can pause at each one if people have questions, or I can go through the whole thing and then we can do questions at the end. Steve, do you have a preference?
Let's go through each one if people have questions.
Okay. So any questions on the social emotional learning piece?
One question is on the categories. Is the distinction between the two, is the learning and instruction in the first column is student focus and the second column is teacher focus?
That's the distinction I'm making. Now, obviously, really strong learning institutions, everybody's learning, but it could have been student learning and instruction and staff learning and instruction, and that may be more accessible. So the next one is the accelerated or recovery learning, and that's both for students and staff again. And this is some of what we started talking about at the beginning, right? The summer programming, the fall programming. I'm not one who wants to do the glasses half empty and bemoan the loss of learning tied to COVID-19. I don't think it's productive. I do want to look at what we can learn from that and how we can meet kids where they are to move them forward. Right, so I think that's going to be a big piece of work for the next several years. And even if we hadn't had a global pandemic, accelerated learning and recovery are significant things for everybody. Any questions on that?
I had a comment on that, but maybe it's for typically just like people always. I know there's a lot of dialogue about the accelerated learning and catching up. My concern is, I mean, you guys have very well thought out and articulated curriculums that you've been using and evolving over time, but the curriculum that you thought you were gonna start with in September of 2019 to 2020 just isn't gonna work this September in a lot of areas, because
Because of the gaps.
yeah, because of the gaps. I mean, I don't know. That's always, I mean, I don't understand how a kid who's just left 8th grade is gonna be able to do algebra. You know, I just think there's gonna be, so, I think that's what you're trying to capture in there. That's the lens I look through it as, is how are we adapting what we would be doing normally around this time to make sure we're not leaving big gaps.
Yeah, so, I mean, really what I think is, like Marie Kondo, like, pick up your stuff and does it give you joy, and if it doesn't give you joy, give it to Goodwill. I think one of the things we're gonna have to do is really look at what's the most significant and important stuff in the curriculum. And even though I like to think our curriculum is thorough, deliberate, thoughtful, and planned, our obligation is not to teach curriculum first, but it's to teach kids and meet them where they are. So I think one of the things we're all going to wrestle with this year is what are the most significant and important pieces of the curriculum, and as we move forward, just investing in relationships may be a huge priority, right? So while most students are back in school now, there's still a fairly sizable percentage that are participating remote. So when we start in late August, September, we have to bring them back and welcome them back. Hopefully we'll be in a place where we're not wearing masks and everybody's vaccinated, or we're only wearing masks in specific contexts, and then we go from there. But there's a lot to do. Also, like the rules of the game have changed, right? Colleges left and right aren't requiring ACTs or SATs. How colleges are evaluating students' capacity and growth has shifted quite dramatically. There have been some shifts in MCAS assessments and the weight that they carry, right? Things that Bill's been talking about for years happened in months because of a global pandemic. So really interesting shifting landscape, lots to do there.
And I also think the workplace. Kids, I was just thinking as you were talking about the number of kids that are remote learning. And I'm translating it to what PBS had this week on the workplace. And the workplace is changing. And these kids are going to be, if they're not, we have to expose them to, your job might be a remote now, at home. And how companies are looking at your ability to do that. Are you coming in 2 days a week? Remote 3, and the following week? It's almost like what we were doing this year with hybrid. They're now looking at the workplace as being almost like what we were doing. And so I think maybe that should, if we're looking at the CBTE component too, that is part of it, that the workplace, as Rich said, 2 years ago when we embarked on the CBTE, it was one thing. Now, it's a lot different in regards to what we're expecting kids to do. So,
yeah, no, really good one. The next one is probably the simplest to explain and the hardest to pull off, which is the math curriculum. We have some very strong practices around teaching math, but it's become clear over the years that we need to make a shift in our curriculum, right? So to have a thoughtfully coherent and aligned math curriculum, K to 12, that's challenging and engaging for kids and that's well supported for staff is essential at this point. And for years, we used different pieces of different curricula. We used something at the elementary school that was very progressive and interesting. But if you think about like how they rate Olympic divers for degrees of difficulty. That was a very high, it was the triple backflip or whatever it is, right, of math curricula. I think we need one that is better supported so that kids have opportunities to do some individual work and teachers are more of this on the same page. So we'll be doing some work on that. There's work going on in the elementary school now, in the middle and high school, and we'll be talking more about math curricula going forward. Questions on that? Sort of the bread and butter issue. Okay, the next three boxes, and they sort of all go together, are proficiency-based assessment and the mastery transcript. So we're making this big shift in how we let students demonstrate their understanding, and we'll be moving from 10-point quizzes and check marks to rubrics and other things that actually are meaningful. This will take years to happen. It'll happen over time. At the same time, at the district and school level, and we'll talk about this in a minute, we'll talk about expanded metrics and reporting. Okay. This one's sort of a really interesting one because it's the emperor has no clothes moment. What does a 90 mean? Right, and sometimes I don't know what a 90 means, and Bill doesn't either, right? It's, you got 9 on 10 quizzes, but what does that mean, right? So it'll be carefully aligned to standards, and also meeting kids or young people where they are. Super complex, super complicated. We'll be talking about this for 10 years. That one, there likely no comments because it's overwhelming. But when we get to the metrics in a couple minutes, it'll become clearer. The next one, pathways and expanded internships. So this aligns with the CBTE work, with strands around human services, manufacturing, all of that. We've done a lot of work here. We want to do more, and particularly we want to continue to place students in really high quality, engaging internships. So they have real world applied experience while they're still in school. So lots to do there and talk about. And I'll pause for a sec. Okay, the next one is DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is long overdue national conversation. We're doing some great work now with a group called the Scope Collaborative, and they're running around and interviewing all sorts of people, community members, parents, students, school committee members, faculty, and staff. That will ultimately lead to what we're temporarily calling sort of an audit of our practices. We talked about this some earlier, connected to hiring and policy and gatekeeping and in curriculum and who's in what club and what context and disaggregating data by any subgroup you could think of. And the three big ones are race, gender, and social class, but there are many others, but a lot of work there. I think it'll be interesting and engaging and hard and challenging. Health, wellness, and mental health. So that's part of why Iona's here to bring this together. I'm really excited. She's running with the baton, and I expect us to do wonderful things there. And we're already doing many wonderful things, but to tie the loose ends together, I think will be really powerful. The Regional School District Planning Board is that whole regionalization study. Some of you are involved in that. That's a lot of work. There are 3 or 4 subcommittees. The group meets 3 or 4 times a week. This will be on our agenda for the foreseeable future. The group is recently contracted with one group in Berkshire County and another group that I think is based out of Virginia to do some additional studies and work to inform our conversations. In buildings and grounds now, I put in fields and courts. Folks who are on that committee know about it. We continue to have a grub issue, and we treated it a few years ago and crossed our fingers, and the evil grubs came back. I think we're going to have a long-term issue with grubs, and then also thinking about what we want to do to manage our fields. We're super excited that so many youth programs are using our fields and the kids are out together moving and doing things. And we really have to plan around field management, ideally rotating fields. So we let one sit and the grubs die and the grass grow back. And that's going to be a challenge. That includes the track and the tennis courts. Another one, recruiting, retention, compensation, and career ladders. And in this instance, I'm particularly signaling paraprofessionals, but also for others. Comparatively, our paraprofessionals are really underpaid. Dunkin' Donuts is now hiring people at $15 an hour. And their benefits, I mean, I guess you get some donuts, but their general benefits might not be any better than ours or significantly worse, but the starting pay for their folks is higher. So that's an area where I think we'll do some work, and some could be in the context of negotiations, and some could be broader than negotiations, right? What does a career ladder look like? How can we recruit more diversely? Can we grow some of our own teachers out of that group? Do we want to have a role between a para and a teacher that lets somebody advance their work? And then a really interesting thing, if teachers come to us from other districts, we could place them where their experience warrants on their salary schedule. And if paras come to us from other districts, right now contractually, they have to go on the first step, right? So we're not valuing people's experience, and there may be great paras in surrounding districts or to move to the area, and we should be able to pay them what they're worth. So that's another one. And then the last one, and this is part of that, but strategic planning has a little bit of a bad name in this district, and this predates me, but developing some sort of action plan in the context of the district improvement plans or something else, and it might be a series of interconnected plans, right? So a capital asset plan, a technology plan, fields and grounds plan, and the instructional plan is largely in the district improvement plan. Okay, so that's a high-level overview of some likely future work. It's not all-inclusive, but some benchmarks or things to be aware of coming down the pike.
Any comments or questions before we move ahead?
I do, Peter. Do we want to put the high school project on there?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, it's not exhaustive, but that seems to be like a big one that's not on the list.
it is, and I didn't put it on because we're in the middle of it right now, but but I could put it on, and I'm happy to do that. And sometimes just naming it gives something value and importance.
Yeah, I think it's big enough to do that. And then more just from a kind of how we could use a document like this, I think I think parent committees that kind of exist at all of the schools, and it would be nice to know kind of as principals are meeting with parents and stuff like that, that whatever initiatives are going on to relate back to this document so that everything, because you're saying these are kind of high level, but just all of the initiatives going on that they tie back to these kinds of things. And if they don't tie back to these things, then maybe they need to, at some high level, also get added to this list.
Right.
But I think it just kind of keeps everyone speaking the same language and kind of honest in terms of what we're doing and what we're communicating on.
Good. Okay.
I don't really, I think everything on here is great. But, my concern is, Steve would tell you, the school committee used to meet annually with the superintendent and set goals, and they would discuss priorities and goals. In other school districts, the school committee sets policies and goals, and the superintendent follows them.
Right.
We're at a point where it sounds like you're just telling us what you're going to do.
No,
that's
that's not my intention. My intention was to raise some things as a straw man, and I'd actually like to talk later about us exploring the possibility of a summer retreat with the school committee with an expanded chunk of time, and using this maybe as a starting point, but to meet around, and this will come up in the next document that I'm about to share, but around data, what you value, what your priorities are, and then we set that collaboratively. If we want to be the kind of district where the school committee sets the goals and the superintendent implements it, we can do that. I think the better model is where we work on it jointly.
I agree.
I think if the school committee just does it without the people that you hired to support it, it's a missed opportunity. And if the superintendent just does it without the school committee, the elected representatives of the community, that's a missed opportunity. So the sweet spot's in the middle. And I don't think our typical hour and a half, 2 hour meeting with all the other stuff we deal with affords us the time to do it. And I think setting aside, and my wife will be upset about this, but a Saturday afternoon or morning or a day in the summer or something, having all done some homework and looked at some things, we could do some really great visioning and planning. And we could facilitate it ourselves if we get along well enough to do that. Or if it's helpful, we could bring in an outside person to help frame some questions. And then in answering the questions, we get to what some priorities are. And then we sort of map those out on a high level. And then either subcommittees work on different parts of it, right? So we could talk about capital plans, and then buildings and grounds could go and fine tune something and get some support from Steve, Sol, and or Sharon, and then bring it back to the whole group to ratify it. And similarly, with every other area addressed. And though recently school committees haven't been directly involved in learning and instruction, I think our relationship in this district can support that, and I think it's important.
Can I suggest that in building and grounds, it's come up occasionally in our building and grounds subcommittee meetings, is some forward, and I think Steve might be working on this now, but something in regards to the elementary and the middle school. People think of them as new, but they were built in 1994. And so
2004.
2000.
It's still 20 years ago, though.
Yeah. So in a sense, there's some needs there, I think, that we could look at in regards to, you're talking about strands, and those buildings are important to the curriculum.
Yeah, no, very, very much so. Right, and again, this is an incomplete list,
Yeah.
but I wanted to, if I gave you a blank page, you might have gotten to all of this,
Yeah.
right? If I'm giving you 10 things, you might help us come up with another 5 to 7.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so what I'm gonna do, and I know this is a long one, the next document is an initial take, and let me share this, of some ways we want to start looking at data and metrics, right? So one of the requirements of the state is that we have a comprehensive annual report. And what I'm proposing here are 3 parts of what that annual report might be. And we'll likely complete it in September or October based on the previous school year. And that way we have enough time to have the spring testing data and the end of year reports, right? And the goal is to not make something that's impossible to get through, but that in many cases is built on existing data, right? So the first part of it would be an accessible executive summary, right? Maybe a 2 to 6 page memo detailing the successes and challenges of the year and some areas for growth going forward at a very high level. And that obviously would be written from scratch each year. The next part would be around more traditional indicators that are publicly available. So an outcome report on the district improvement plan. So every year we work from a district improvement plan and we say we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but we don't always go back and talk about did we accomplish X, Y, and Z or to what degrees. All the state-generated accountability reports or documents, right? So the state does that every year. We'll share that as part of this. And depending on the time, we might share the previous year's report as a placeholder. And then if the state releases their report in November, we include it as an addenda, right? The prevention needs assessment survey results. So that's that survey that 8th, 10th, and 12th graders do every year. They just did it. It's important. I mean, it's a traditional report, but it speaks to risk and redemptive factors in schools, families, and the community. And it's a nice additional indicator to the more traditional test scores, attendance, graduation, dropout rates. Post-secondary report, so where are students going? And I shared that I'll share that likely at our next meeting, the where kids are going both for this year and the past 5 years. And then the last one, and we do this in the context of our audit, but reporting that we're in compliance with state laws and regulations and detailing areas for growth, right? So if we run culinary classes in a substandard physical space, we're not really in compliance, right? If we're supposed to be offering X years of something and we're offering less than that, then we're also not in compliance. So that's sort of the more traditional one. And then the third one, and this stuff would likely be generated, would be student, family, and staff surveys. The next one is the one I'm most excited about, which are predictive measures of student growth, right? So the correlation between ninth grade success and credit accumulation and those ninth graders' eventual graduation rate is almost perfect. So if we know that, and if we know that 12 ninth graders didn't have a successful enough first semester, then we can intervene tremendously, get them to turn it around by the second semester, and then their likelihood of graduating in 4 years goes through the roof. There are all sorts of other predictive indicators which are similar to that. So we can define more of those. I'd like to start counting and valuing things that we don't count and value right now, like the number and quality of internships. In many cases, students who end up with really neat post-secondary opportunities do those based on the kind of life experiences they had, right? So it could be somebody doing the internship at AIER, but it could be somebody doing an internship at a garage that then sets them to go to Hudson Valley Community College to be part of their technical program. It could be the student who works or does an internship with the Yaples around Arbery, and then they land a position at the Stockbridge School in horticulture or farming, right? So I think we could do a much better job there. Work around analyzing alternative assessments and proficiency-based learning. Other insights into what's happening in the schools. We're now able to use a thing called Performance Matters, which is tied to our own student data and lets us manipulate and present data in interesting ways. So there are opportunities there. I'd like to look really carefully at participation of students and different kinds of students in all sorts of areas. Academic, athletic, extracurricular, who's doing what in what context and where are their gaps and why, and how can we close that. And then the last one, and maybe really should be up in the second one, is the special education report card. So a whole lot there. I think it's a pretty good framework. I think we'll start doing it. We'll continue to have conversations in the community around what's missing and how we do our gap analysis, I think will be really important and significant. Questions or reactions to that?
I was gonna say, some of this is in the budget booklet, like some of the data, and it's interesting that as you were going over, I was thinking of the pages that I read in the budget that have some of the things in number 2.
Yeah, no,
which I think is helpful for the public especially.
Yeah, very much so, and I think what we'll do is we'll do this as a standalone report, and then the section in the budget book that has a lot of this can just be this again. That's why sort of we've not been focusing on it exhaustively, and our budget book is probably a better annual report than many districts' annual reports, but this is taking it to the next level.
So this would come out in the form of a budget book, but would include all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think
my idea is this is a wonderful way to communicate with the public based on the discussion that we had in the proficiency-based shift to the proficiency-based shift. One of the things that came out to me is that many people saw this suddenly, oh my God, you just suddenly dumped this on us. And my response to some people, former teachers especially, was no, we've been working on this since 2017. Right. And in a way, I think a book like this, and then made available to the public. So there are copies in the libraries in all 3 towns. selectmen and finance committees get a copy of it. So nobody can say, where did this come from? You can always say, well, if you read, there it is. We're taking a lot of things that are not in the budget, but we're looking at being more open. And I think that's very important. I like this direction that this is going. I hope.
Yeah, this is, Bill, this is going back to, we used to have a budget, annual report, and we kind of shied away from it. But I think part of our problem is communication with the community, not just staff and not just parents, but the whole community. And besides being important and required, the annual report gives us, select board members, finance committees, anyone in the community who's interested can pick up the budget or the annual report and just look at it and really see where we are and where we're going. And I think that's something that we're sorely lacking, and this will be very helpful.
I think this is all awesome.
Yeah.
This is a lot of work. Even if it just was compiling and organizing and quality controlling existing data, it's a lot of work. And I think it's even more than that. I mean, this could be somebody's like almost like full-time job. I think it's valuable. I would vote for whatever measure was proposed to staff to this.
Right.
But I am very cognizant of we keep adding responsibilities to our administrative team without expanding our administrative team.
Yeah, so I mean, that's music to my ears, and I really appreciate it. I don't have a proposal right now. The executive summary is a thoughtful 4 to 6 page memo. I can do that in a couple days, right? The whole second.
Yeah, by the time we add up all your couple day projects, it's
No,
a whole
I know.
year, man. We're supposed to be the superintendent.
Yeah. The whole second section is largely around aggregating existing files, right? And as much as I want to put this together as a printed document, it really screams to be a web-based document, right? Because then people can click on things, and we're not producing a 400-page document. I think maybe we do a little booklet that's an executive summary that directs people to a web-based document, so you could click around and have a field day. The last section is quite significant, but the nice thing is principals and teachers and other staff are doing a lot of this work. And again, it's about aggregating and framing. There's some efficiencies we can realize. This year in particular is like the year of the survey. And if I ask people to take another survey, I'm just going to make them crazy. So part of what we need to do, like the parallel document to this, is let's figure out how many surveys we can do in a year, like 3, and map it all out so it's not like every 2 weeks there's another survey that somebody's doing. And then what we know already, let's just pull from an existing database and not ask it again.
But Peter, I think the point is that this is a 365-day project, because once you finish the one in November, you're starting the one for next November. And I think it's terrific. But I also hope after the first one's done, which I think is going to be a load of work, that you'll have a format that'll make it easier each time you do it.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And again, this may be something that, and we can talk about this, that we organize it, and then we bring in a graphic designer to present it in a way that's really accessible, but they're not a full-time employee. They work on this project for 2 weeks or something.
Yeah, it's possible it's a student could be used in regards to some of this. I'm just thinking Josh Shapiro, who was a former student and was involved in our Next Steps, and now runs a program after school. Very computer, certainly literate, and this is not something that he does engineering and things like that, but somebody like that, or even a high school student who would want an internship, in computer generated information. Oh, boy, there's a part-time job right there.
Yeah, no, I think it's good.
And I agree with Rich. I think, I'm thinking of the school project. I'm thinking of what Sharon is gonna have to do.
Yep.
And I would certainly be, very positive in regards to having someone added on, because I don't think that this is possible for just one person, not even two.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. One other thing I want to do is a nice thought partner in this, and I need to reach out to him again, has been Bob Redpath, community, a parent of kids and a community member. And a lot of this is informed by suggestions he shared. And I think it's worth fine tuning this again, and sort of balancing what information is high priority and interest versus how much time we want to invest in this. So there's a balance there, and I'll reach back out to him and some other people for thoughts around it. Sharon also did a nice job looking at some other districts' annual reports. Almost everybody has a good first two sections, but we like to do things a little differently. So the third section is not that common.
I'd like just to see a word added, additional indicators that should be district generated. I think this is needed in any type of annual report, everything that's here. I think it should be generated by the district.
No, I like that. Thank you, Bill. So going right along, we still have some vacancies that we're looking to fill. You'll see on the personnel report that we've brought in a kindergarten teacher, an elementary school teacher, a special education teacher, and obviously I introduced Cynthia earlier, so I'm excited about those three people, and we welcome them. And then this is the time of year where we continue to have retirements. So these are three more, two from the middle school and one from the elementary school. David Heath, long-standing Spanish teacher, is retiring, and we wish him well and really appreciate all he did. Particularly all those trips over the years.
And the exchange to come up with them. You put a lot of time and effort, and a lot of kids really benefit from that.
Yeah. I mean, the Peru, Spain, the Canary Islands, which is the Nantucket of Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, right. But so that's great. Nancy Kane, a long-term library media specialist who in recent years has really done a lot with technology. So we'll miss her. And then Denise Pegareri, an elementary school paraprofessional. So that's where we are. With that, we're still filling some positions, and the nice thing is we're getting lots of applications. So that's really good. I think earlier I touched on the COVID-19 stuff, and that seems...
Can I make a comment on the extracurricular appointments?
Yeah.
I'm really disappointed that we don't have female coaches for the female teams. I look at this, I know Jess Black was tremendous and she's probably moving on, but I'm just really disappointed that we have all men and we have girls teams without a role model as a female. So I'm just making that point. I know it's what's out there and the appointments, whatever the field is, that's what you have to pick from. But boy, I wish we would reach out to more women and say, I saw the ads. I know your hands are tied in regards to accepting applications, but, recruiting women for women's sports, I think is really important. That's just my...
I don't think there's a lot of disagreement on that. This was an unusual year. And I'm satisfied that those efforts were I think Electric went above and beyond in very difficult situations this year. But like a lot of things didn't happen perfectly in a COVID year. That has to be reprioritized. I agree. But I don't think this year had anything to do with lack of effort on that front.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what a year to be a coach, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
just like, I thank them from the bottom of my heart, the very short, compacted seasons, all sorts of protocols, lots of people coaching, multiple teams, like Randy Coldis coached everybody, right? And I mean, thank goodness he was retired.
Why have less teachers coaching now?
It's,
From my perspective, I think in talking to people, I think it's a full-time job teaching. I mean, they have said, this is what I'm gonna do, and I have to devote my time to this, I can't do this other stuff.
the other thing that I think is worth looking ourselves in the mirror over is the climate of coaching and the pressure coaches are under, right? So, I mean, I go to Price Chopper and people ask me about their kids' playing time, and I'm just the superintendent, right? So imagine like coaches getting called out about that.
We had a superintendent that did that, so many years ago.
I think that, not just kind of statewide though, I think the majority of coaches are teachers. If you look at the rest of the state and even in Berkshire County, just trying to think it off the head, and I think we have an abnormally low amount compared to speaking. And that's just anecdotally, but I would like to see the numbers as far as that goes. But a lot of the other schools I'm just trying to think of, a lot of the coaches are teachers. At least
It's an anomaly in our district.
Well, the other thing too, like we, and I think it's changing with now a number of people retiring this year, but we have a relatively senior or experienced staff, and I think many people coached for many years earlier in their mid-career, and then they stepped away from it, right?
But, you know, I'll just also, I think what you've hit on something because it's national. This climate that has been engendered in the last few years of being critical, calling people names, it has come out in the incidences that I've been reading about involving coaching. It's just incredible, the number of schools that have to tell parents to sign a contract to do this, and you can't do that. I sit there at the Housatonic, I'm the warden of Precinct B, so I'm reading the rules for Housat basketball. And it really is interesting that they have to put the rules on that you don't berate the players, coaches, or officials. It's there. I mean, when I was playing, that you have the occasional parent, but not to the extent today. I think that discourages people too. And they read about it, they see it, it's on video, and everybody's got the instant, look what this coach did.
No.
I think it's part of that too.
Well, I think it's a good point, and I mean, most of the coaching is at the high school level, so I'll check in with Christy and Carl on it, and I think it probably makes sense to look at how can we recruit additional women to coach girls sports or young women, and how can we encourage our own faculty to coach too. And not that everybody has to coach all 3 seasons, but can people find time to do it? I mean, the other thing that's really tough is if you're coaching the same time you have young children, you're really pulled in multiple directions or dependent on your. Right. Okay. That's a good point.
I put in a word for the track coaches. I think we got a couple of good track coaches this year.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad to have people from the community coming back, kids who were running track themselves and are coming back to coach. It's great.
I have no complaints about any of the coaches. There's broader policy issues, which I think.
And I do agree with you, Richard. This has been an unusual year.
Yeah.
So moving forward, so we dealt with COVID-19, we dealt with vacancies. Steve, we're to subcommittee reports.
I'm ready for that. Is there, instead of me reading the list, is there any subcommittees that want to report? because I don't know we've had a lot of meetings. We've talked about the buildings and grounds and finance already, the joint meeting. Is any subcommittee not hearing any? We've talked about the personnel report. How about any old or new business? So I think this was a really good meeting tonight. It was really thoughtful. We have a lot of irons in the fire, but I think we're doing well. I think Rich's comment is well taken that I think it's collegial between the school committee and the superintendent to come up with goals. Rich mentioned that, we used to have school committee goals that was basically the school committee telling the superintendent what they expected and made us look good. But I think if we work together, I think this would be a good thing. I think we have a really good start to next year, and I think it's pretty exciting. Anyone else with any comments? By unanimous consent, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Steve, can you stay on for a minute?
No. By the way, I didn't want to call you out though. But
Here, let me-
your question,
let me-
I'm curious with this, why are there not more women coaching boys sports?